the Ripple Effect podcast. Like usual, me and Dave Kornacki. We'll probably get into a conversation pretty quickly. The only thing I am going to say is thanks everybody who's listening to this stuff, because I know I keep saying it every episode, but I really appreciate the fact that we put out an episode and almost 48 hours later we have like 100 plays and listens and downloads and stuff, and I think it's amazing. I don't know who the hell's listening to it, honestly. I have no idea, because I don't think Podomatic gives any real statistics on where or who's listening to it, but whoever it is, it's pretty amazing, because like I said, it's only our 4th episode.
Yeah, I can think of a handful of people. You have a number in your mind of people that you know, or people that we talk to or relate to and talk about this to, and then the number is far more than that. So there are total strangers out there listening.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, with me, it's at 100. It seems like a lot, because it's like nobody's listening to this stuff more than once. I assume, they're like probably listen to it once, twice, maybe, and then after that, you're not gonna listen to it again. So
I don't even know about twice, maybe.
Maybe not even once. Maybe nobody gets through the whole thing. It is 95 minutes or whatnot. But
so if you're listening and you don't listen to the whole thing through, the ending is always the best. So hang in there.
Well, it's funny. Some of our podcasts have been like that. Like episode 2. We've gotten the very end of it. We got in like a couple of really good conversations. Yeah. And I'm like, I remember listening it back. I'm like, because I almost forgot what we talked about, and because usually I'm all over the place. But so I went back and I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, we were making some pretty good points. I'm like, I hope somebody got this far into the podcast.
I'll listen to it, and because I'll go to hashtag stuff to put it on Twitter to get some interest. And I'll be sitting there thinking, like, what did we talk about? And I'll have to listen to it to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. And I'll jot little notes down.
Oh, I do the same thing. Every time I put it on Twitter and I hashtag things, I'm constantly like...
And I'll see this stuff that you put down. I'm like, we talked about that?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, we did.
And same thing with you. You put stuff up, and I'm just like, wait, we talked about that? I'm like, oh, that's right. And then all of a sudden I remember like a little piece of that conversation. But that's the cool thing about conversations, is that they kind of go anywhere and then go... Just like before we got here. I wish we were taping some of those.
I know, even at dinner, the conversation we had.
But it's funny, because that's exactly why I started this podcast, because those type of conversations I wanted to capture, but you don't realize how spontaneous they are, and how you never know when they're going to happen, and I guess we try to do our best of having them now while the record button is
what I think we do a pretty good job of capturing those conversations. I think we might start off a little rocky, but then we kind of just get rolling, and then it turns into that.
Well, it's a shame that we can't do this for a living. You know how good we would be, just being able to have like a clear mind to gather your thoughts and put things together and then talk, Well,
like we talked about earlier tonight, this is like an escape from work.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We don't have to think about the things we did all day. We can just freely talk about whatever.
And bounce ideas, and especially now with like the work season's been really crazy. I know work's been really crazy with you too. And to work on music seems really hard right now, because you need a long period of time. You need some time to write. And it almost gets so stressful that it almost becomes more work. Where this is so easy, because naturally both of us do this all the time with just people we run into anywhere. That the only difference is we're hitting record and putting microphones in front of us. But this seems like almost the most natural thing. I had a friend who's overseas playing basketball, my buddy Renato, and I remember when I first like kind of was just telling people about the idea and stuff, and he's like, Rick, I think this is your calling. Like, basketball is my calling. And I'm like,
this is definitely your calling.
Wait, but it's yours too, because the thing is, you're just a same person, but I guess and different. It's funny how I always tell people, like, yeah, me and Dave are very similar. But in the back of my head, I'm like, but we're not really that similar. But a lot of the important things are similar. Like, we're both open-minded. Our ideas might be different sometimes. Yeah. We might butt heads with, like, philosophies at times. But we're both willing to hear all sides. Right. And I think that's a lesson.
I don't think it's just willing. I think I like it. I enjoy listening to other perspectives.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, where it's sometimes you can convince yourself of anything, and you hear somebody's different perspective, and you're like, holy crap, I never thought of it that way. I never saw it that way. And all of a sudden you have a better perspective. I mean, nobody's born with knowledge. I mean, you get it in, you take it in from somewhere. So the more good ideas you can take in, and then you pick the parts you like, you're creating a great idea based on that, So,
you mentioned songwriting, and I got to get my one Pearl Jam mention in for the night, but tonight on XM Radio, I was listening to, they did a town hall forum with the members of Pearl Jam, and they had fans asking questions. And of course, the most common question related to songwriting: what's the inspiration behind this song, and how do you sit down and write songs like this? And I think you'd be really interested in hear to hear what these guys had to say about the process
I
of
love
writing
that.
songs.
I
It was amazing. I mean, they were asked basically the same question 3 times in a row about, what was your inspiration to this song? And they try to answer it generally. And then the very next question was, what was your inspiration for this song? And everybody laughed because the answer to the first question was purposefully general. It wasn't specific about the song. So when the second question was asked, it was Eddie Vedder that answered. He began his answer exactly how he began it the first time. It was pretty funny. But they do talk about the creative process and of how they come together with different parts of the song, and how certain guys aim to do this and certain guys aim to do that. It's just really, it's awesome to get inside the process of the birth of a song.
Well, because I think we still don't understand creativity. We don't know where it comes from. Like, I hear tons of different philosophies on. Some people believe, and actually a lot of people who've done ayahuasca and have had these psychedelic like trips and stuff. They think that there's basically our brains are like a antenna, and imagination and creativity and these ideas are out there. And even if you turn off your antenna, the waves are still out there. But then if you for some reason pick up on those waves, then all of a sudden you get that hit of inspiration. Other people, like, I talk a lot about Jacques Fresco, the guy from the Venus Project. He believes that we're all basically created the same way, and all you do is, as you're growing and you're taking in information, you're just taking a little bit of information there, a little information there, then you're making this brew of different ideas where you think that idea came from nowhere, or we're like, how did I come up with that? But it really was influenced by other things
that makes a lot of sense.
That makes a little bit more sense. I guess the other one, I've never done DMT. I've never done, because people who've done it, they say it's changed their complete perspective. It's this just, you see something that you can't explain. You see something like Alex Gray, who's that artist who's done the Tool stuff.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And it's anybody who's done it. They have this they see, they're so strong about the fact that it makes you self-reflect in ways you can never, like, you'll know. Because we justify things, we justify when we're acting like assholes. We justify when we're being stubborn and we don't want to admit it. And it seems like ayahuasca, the same thing, the same experience you hear from everybody is the fact that it changes your whole perspective on things. It changes the way you look at yourself, and that's the most important part, is the fact that you look at yourself in a way that you think that you're making the right decisions. You think that it's that person's fault, it's not yours. And then this makes you look in the mirror and erase all the bullshit, all the justifications you've ever made in your life, and have to see who you really are. And I think that's scary, because you might see somebody that you don't want to believe is there. Like, we might be a little bit more selfish than we want to believe. We might be a little more self-absorbed than we want to believe. And that experience changes everything. And Joe Rogan said it, how some people will say that, some people believe that it's this, it takes you on this journey and this other realm or this other dimension, and it feels like that. And then other people believe, no, it's just your mind creating these things. And he's made a good point that it doesn't really matter what's creating it or where it's going. The experience is the same.
Yeah, if it's an experience and if it affects you, then
what you're taking from it remains the same. The lessons are still there, and I think that's an important thing. I think that the argument about what psychedelics actually do to your brain, or if you actually go somewhere, if it's this greater being that you maybe that helps you reflect on your life and put you on the right path, is that real or is that self-made? I don't think that's really that important, because I think at the end of the day, the fact that it helps you look at things in a very uninfluenced from that other not so pure things.
I was going to say, you said not so pure, but I was going to say in a pure way.
Yeah. Because it's we don't realize how many decisions we make are basically because of things we don't even realize that are influencing our decision making. I had this teacher in high school who he had this I can't see. I'm gonna do a bad job explaining this, because he explained to me, but now I get the concept of it. It was this idea that there's this type of meditation that your whole life you wrote with your right hand, like you were taught to write with your right hand. There's this type of meditation where you would write questions and answer to those questions with your left hand, and it was a way of tapping into this part of you, this innocent part of you inside you that wasn't yet influenced from the outside realm. And I was like really trying to find out how you really felt about certain situations and how you really felt about life decisions and stuff like that. And it was this weird meditation about like this part of us that might still be innocent in us, that there's ways of maybe tapping into it. And that always seemed really intriguing to me, because it's like a lot of times we don't realize that I might buy this car because I'm telling myself I like this car, but really it's because I know that, people are going to look at me like I'm financially successful, or girls might think I have money and I might attract some girls, so it's like, it's hard to find out why you really do things. And that's why when I think the whole ayahuasca and DMT and all these things, I think that it makes sense, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think you can abuse anything. You can abuse coffee. You can abuse painkillers. I just read somewhere that painkillers kill more people than coke and crack last year or this year.
Every
something
time
like that.
there's a statistic,
Yeah. Well, I know they
about
broke the
that,
car
it's-
accident thing. That
yeah.
now it kills more people than car accidents, which is insane. But so it's the idea that, okay, are you just picking the certain things that you want to say are dangerous, and then basically, the things that bring in money, tax, whatever, that you can tax, then that stuff can be legal, even though it's also addictive and also kills people and ruins lives. But this stuff will say, whatnot. But before we get too off subject, the thing that I've been really excited to hear about, because I don't know too much about it, and I try to be a sponge with information, and I want to take in as much as I can to kind of, like I told you at dinner, like I feel like life's this puzzle, and every piece of information you can get, it's one more piece of that puzzle that might make the picture make a little bit more sense. And I think that's kind of my life goal, is just try to assemble as much of that picture as possible until my final day. But so that's kind of one of the things I'm excited about, is just the story about what was it? It was the 8th, or October 8th was the anniversary of a World War I battle, which Dave's grandfather was a part of. And it's a pretty amazing story. Dave's gonna share the story with you guys and me, because I read some of it, but I kind of didn't want to know too much about it, because I wanted to hear it from Dave's mouth and make sure I didn't hear some false information. And being a part of, I know that it touched your life, hearing these stories growing up, and I'll tell you, it's amazing story, because it reminded me of my parents. Just the idea that he came here as a immigrant, and just basically joined the military, in hopes to become an American citizen, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
he enlisted in the army, which was common for immigrants back then, to expedite their citizenship, and that's what my grandfather did. And it's funny, the way I usually start telling the story is that I never believed it growing up. I would hear, my father as a child, I would hear my father talking to his brothers about this event that happened, and it was always this Sergeant York this and Sergeant York that. And they would just blast this guy. He was a coward, and he didn't do anything, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was really to the extreme, to the point where they were spewing venom as they told the story. Especially my oldest uncle, who must have heard firsthand from their father, the most, because it's very common for veterans of battle to not talk about this kind of thing.
Usually they say if they don't talk about it, it means they went through some serious stuff.
So the fact that my father and his brothers knew what they knew, I'm sure alcohol-induced conversation would ensue when those guys were younger, and he would tell them these stories. But so those were the stories I would hear growing up, and not believe them to be true.
So this York guy, for people who don't know, was the person who got
all the credit, 100%.
All the credit for this battle that your grandfather was a part of.
There's a couple things that and I'll get into like the research and everything like that, because there obviously there were other members of this detachment that were involved in this battle, but there's a couple things that are said repeatedly through history. You pick up, and I've done this. I'll pick up any history book, any World War I history book will have something in there about Alvin York, and you're guaranteed to see the word single-handedly, and you'll see the other members of the detachment called survivors. So instead of being participants in this battle, they're labeled as survivors, and continually Alvin York is given credit for single-handedly carrying out this mission. And it's one of those things where when the story originated, instead of anybody researching it and telling it fresh, it was just quote after quote of people would quote this this actually the original story was written in a New York in the New York Post or the Saturday Evening Post, and that's where the story started. And then following that, out came a book. They called it the Alvin York Diary, and it was actually it had nothing to do with Alvin York. It was written by a poet, an Australian poet named Thomas Scahill. And the story behind this guy was he was the ultimate charlatan. He actually feigned blindness and then somehow got his sight back. He was like a sideshow kind of guy.
Wow.
But he ended up writing the diary of Alvin York, and those two sources are the sources of all the information that exists today. So if you were to, I'm surprised it wasn't in the newspaper. I'm sure 5 years from now at the 100-year anniversary, anytime there's any article about Alvin York, you'll see the word single-handedly or survivors. And those are the two things that really bother us.
Well, it's funny you say that because I never thought about it, but you think of like how, we love heroes. We love hearing heroic stories. There's tons of movies based on, you hear based on true events and all this stuff. And we always just kind of put this hero on a pedestal, but we never think about like, well, what about these other people that are part of this movie that are just doing little clips or little scenes in this movie? Like, what if that was my family member? I'd feel like, well, I was a big part of this, or there's a part of the story that's not being told. And I think you've said it before, where it's not so much you want York to get less credit as much as you think that there's some. Well, actually, you didn't say that. I think I read it somewhere. You said that.
Anything you read on the website is, I would say 90% of the material on that website is something that I've written.
And that the website is
the hyphen other16.com. .org. It's a
.org. That's right. Yeah. And then it tells you, and you created the website.
Myself and
some other family members,
not my family members,
but of other
family
people
members
part
of other of the survivors that were part of this battle. But what motivated me to look into this all, and this is, as a kid, the internet didn't exist for me, so these stories were just passed on from my grandfather to my father to me. And they were definitely watered down, and there was no way to research all of this stuff. But now with the internet, and more because there's another member of the active group now. His name is Bob D'Angelo. He lives down in Connecticut, and he's actually the great nephew of the sergeant of this detachment, the true leader of this detachment. And he was the guy that really rounded all of us up. And what we found is that for every survivor, every family member that took part in this battle, just like my home and my father's home and my grandfather's home, there was always this grumbling about this thing happening, because different events would happen, and it was such a big deal that the story kept getting told over and over and again. And all these guys that were part of this battle were like, this is absolute bullshit. This is not true.
Just reading some of the articles on the website, I got attached to this story and your grandfather's story just because I think it was so similar to like my family's story, like coming here as a foreigner, going to a foreign country, not knowing much of the language, working at a factory, hoping to become a citizen, so future family members of yours and your bloodline can have a better future and all this stuff, and not, it really hit home with me because that's my parents' story.
That's
the American
struggle
story
of the immigrant. That's what made this country what it is.
It is. It's those stories are so important because that's the backbone of America. You look at it, the Italians at one time were discriminated against. The Irish at one time were discriminated against. I remember when JFK was running for president, I remember hearing stories with people who grew up around those times, and they said that they remember saying, "Oh, this is the first Catholic as president. Oh, the Vatican's going to run the U.S." Like, stuff today that seems absolutely insane.
It's all motivated by fear.
It is, and but it's like it's this fear, and so it's just like the same way you realize that every immigrant, every country of immigrants, the immigrants that come here that settle here, they all get discriminated against until they realize they're just a part of what becomes America.
Well, the other members of this detachment were first generation Americans. My grandfather came from Poland. This whole unit was made up of Irish, Italian, Polish. They were all.
York was English.
York was the American in the group.
Yeah, because he already had some family that was here.
Exactly.
He was ready.
Which is why all the honor was bestowed upon him, which is why
because
he was made he was made the center of the story.
but that made sense.
Through a little bit of his own talk, and my personal belief from what I've researched is that it was one of those things where the story got out of control. I truly believe that because I've read a lot of stuff that York actually said, and he's really said a lot of things in support of his of the other guys, and he's quoted as saying, you know,